Don't act surprised. You knew this was coming. Hey guys, this is Jules with True Crime Reactions. Disclaimer. Everything stated in this video is my opinion and my opinion only. And just like everything else in these cases we discuss here on this channel, everything is alleged. Drunk Turkey Show decided to have Howard Blum, I don't really honestly care, on their live doing like a little interview yesterday. I think it was yesterday. I saw it scrolling around being talked about on Twitter after my live yesterday, so I'm just going to assume it was yesterday. Anyway, I went through and listened to it today. Not impressed. Never impressed with Howard. I don't understand. He's got good, like, literary capability. Obviously, he knows how to write, but when it comes to writing this kind of stuff, he honestly just doesn't need to be doing it. Because not only is he writing all this insane stuff, acting like he actually knows details of a case with an extreme gag order, but also writing a book that's coming out in like a week before the trial that's already been sold for movie rights that's apparently going to be coming out like around the holidays. So what you going to do, Mister? If it turns out Bryan's not the guy and you've done all of this writing and all this publishing and all of this stuff, are you going to have to give that money back? Curious. Now, like I normally do, I took some clips of things that I found important in between all of his me bullshit. It's a lot. He is really, really bad at not just getting to the point and saying what he wants to say without putting in the fact that he wrote this in great detail, or it goes into great detail in his book. We get it. You wrote a book when you shouldn't have. Shut up about it. Now, again, let me just reiterate this part. I don't really care that Stacy Chapin wrote a book about Ethan. I kind of think that's therapeutic. What I care about is the fact that that seems to be the only damn thing that she seems to care about. Okay? Same thing here with Howard. He gives me mixed signals about what he really feels and what he really thinks. He says certain things that makes me think that he's questioning what happened in this investigation and if they are on the right path, but then he says the opposite, but then he flip-flops again. And as always, the link for this will be in the description box if you guys want to go and listen to the whole thing, because I'm not going to replay the whole thing. I'm only going to show you guys what I feel is important. So let's get started with this first clip.
I went through families of people who were close to people involved in the case. And if the actual family members couldn't talk to, I took it for granted that they might have talked to their relatives. And the more I started banging on doors, making phone calls, going to different restaurants and bars with different people, I was able to get family members to talk a great deal. One of the things I'm not going to do is tell you who I spoke with or who I didn't speak with, because people who did speak to me spoke in confidence because of the gag order.
So basically, you went around harassing people, and you got people that are technically under the gag order to actually speak to you. That's how I'm taking that.
There was no suspect. There was no murder weapon. There was no trail of blood out of the house.
That right there has been something that's been a huge problem for me since day one. And one of the hugest reasons why my daughter, who's 17, literally thinks that the roommates know more than they do and are involved in some way is that right there. The fact that there was no blood trail outside of the house at all. And I don't understand how he knows that, but then says some of the other things that he says, which of course I'll point out here in just a second. But let's go ahead and listen to what he says about, do you guys remember that receipt that they found in Bryan Kohberger's apartment? I believe the second time around, whenever Ann Taylor met up with John Daniels, which I am understanding now, and this is a little bit sidetracked, but not really. There's people that are just now starting to talk about the blood samples that were taken from Bryan Kohberger's apartment that were misplaced. This is something that we discussed a long time ago. So I'm just going to reiterate, this is what the videos look like. Dawn Daniels is the WSU officer who, in her own narrative right here, I have all of this paperwork. We will probably have to go through this again in a live soon. We probably should. But right here in her own narrative, she claims that she misplaced it. She doesn't use that word. She doesn't use that word at all. I am using that word, okay? Because she took the 3 blood samples, did not put them with the rest of the inventory from the search warrant inventory for that apartment, didn't bother letting them know from how this sounds, okay? Didn't take the little 10 to 12 minute drive it would have taken for her to go and bring it where it needed to be, and then handed the stuff over to Ann Taylor 10 days later right in front of Bryan Kohberger's apartment. This is also the time where Dawn Daniels claims that she watched them walk into his apartment and remove this receipt, from what I'm understanding, and if I remember correctly, from underneath the bathroom cabinet, like sink, bathroom cabinet, which I find strange. Why are your receipts in a bathroom cabinet? I know sometimes receipts can get like stuck in Walmart bags, Kroger bags, shopping bags, and a lot of people keep grocery bags to use as like trash bags for their small trash cans, like the ones in your bathroom. I know I do, and like everybody in my family on both sides and everywhere else does too. So maybe that's the reason, but it was very specific and strange to me that they walked in to his apartment and went straight there and grabbed that receipt like Bryan knew exactly where it was. I pay attention to all the details. That is one of the things that I honestly can't let go of, but they're still not proving their case to me. But I'm also not stupid. I think of all the things, trust me. But this is what he has to say about this receipt, what was on the receipt, and what the feds think about what was on the receipt.
Before the murders, uh, Bryan Kohberger goes to a Walmart and he buys a sort of blue workman suit. And I was, and one theory is that he wore that blue workman suit on the night of the murders. That's why there was no blood anywhere. That's one of the most amazing things about the case: the absence of blood, anything that Bryan Kohberger had in his car, or whatever, and a trail of blood outside the house. You would think with so much blood that was literally dripping out of the floorboards of the house. Everyone has seen that photo of the blood dripping out of the side of the house. There's so much it couldn't even be contained in the four walls. There was nothing on Bryan Kohberger. And one theory that the FBI is taking quite seriously is that this blue workman suit that he had, they have a receipt for it, and that perhaps he wore that in the house at night, later put it in a plastic garbage bag or whatever, and that was one of the things that he might have gotten rid of on that ride.
So he was so meticulous that way ahead of time, he went and bought an outfit for the occasion, made sure he got rid of everything just perfectly. But he kept the receipt. Make it make sense. Another thing about this is that this outfit would not have stopped him from getting injured. Okay? It wouldn't have. We are under the understanding at this point, from what they're trying to tell us, that there was a DoorDash delivery around 4 a.m. and that Xana and Ethan were apparently just oblivious to what was going on upstairs because they were getting a DoorDash delivery. I highly doubt it. Okay? I believe if anybody was asleep, it was Maddie. I think that Kaylee was woken up by Murphy maybe acknowledging the fact that somebody strange was in the house, that Xana maybe was the person that said, hey, somebody's here. I don't know. I personally still think it was Kaylee, because if there was a DoorDash person driving around, you'd see headlights and that would be your reaction. Hey, somebody's here, because of where the headlights are going. It could be because of the intruder, or it could be because of the dasher. It could be either or. But there's no way that you're going to sit here as the police department and tell the entire world that Xana was getting a DoorDash order and that Ethan wasn't going to be like participating in eating said food, that they weren't up together and getting food together. I highly doubt that they weren't. It would make more sense, especially with the details that we know from Christy telling Daniel with Drunk Turkey a lot of things over a year ago about Ethan's body being behind the door and Hunter Johnson being called over, which is something else that Howard talks about later on in these clips. So my point to all of that is this. Just like there's no injuries on him visibly from anyone that saw him the few days after the incident, and there was quite a few people, okay? Not only were there no like visible injuries, that outfit would not stop you from getting your face scratched at. Even a regular mask would not have stopped him from getting attacked in the face and it showing. And there's no way that you would get into a tumble or get into some sort of anything with somebody as big as Ethan, with as big as Bryan actually is, and it not cause injuries. So are they going to tell us they found fibers from that exact same outfit in the house? But they don't have the exact same outfit, right? They don't even know where anything is that might have anybody's blood on it because everything is just non-existent. So what are they going to do to try to match this situation? Because if they can't match it, if there's no proof of anything, if they can't find the outfit, if they can't actually prove that that outfit itself went through that house because fibers were left in the house or DNA was put on the outfit, then how can they prove anything? I mean, honestly, this outfit could have been bought because it was going to be getting cold and he likes to go on runs. He likes to jog. He's very well known for being somebody that walks around in parks. We've heard that since the beginning. It could literally have just been a cold weather in the middle of the night going on a jog type outfit and have literally nothing to do with anything. But they're going to spin it how they want to. But I still believe it's a bit strange if Dawn Daniels' narrative is correct, the way that Ann Taylor and Bryan Kohberger's defense team kind of like made a beeline to get that receipt. If her narrative is accurate, it is a bit odd.
There was real animosity uh, between the local Moscow task force and the FBI. And they didn't work together as a well-functioning team. That allowed, I think, the suspect to remain at large for longer than he should have. When he officially became a person of interest, Bryan Kohberger, to the FBI, they did not share this immediately with the Moscow Police Department.
One wants to know why. Why was there animosity between the local police department and the feds basically from the very beginning? That doesn't really make a lot of sense. Now, we know that now that we're in the courtroom, there's a lot of problems getting information from the feds. And most of their excuses are, well, we don't have to show our work, so there's nothing for us to hand over. But that's not okay. That's not okay at all when it comes to the fact that it's literally for all of it, for the cell phone data, for anything pertaining to his car, for the IgG, for the DNA on the knife sheath. None of it's being really like given over to the state from the feds because there's nothing to give over, according to the feds. But this is crazy to me that they were fighting before, it sounds like. Because why would there just be like this intense animosity between the two if it wasn't already there beforehand, if that makes sense? We've seen how not professional, I guess, the feds are in this, but what can we really expect from the FBI, right? But we also need to remember that Moscow PD are the ones that sent the DNA information that they claim they got from the ISP lab over to Othram. And then the feds came in and told Othram, stop everything that you're doing. Don't do anything else. Hand us everything. Don't touch it. By the way, don't say a word to anybody else. I feel like we've talked about this, but I feel like we still don't have the answer to if Moscow PD like knew that that was happening, or if the feds just told them, hey, this is what's going to happen and this is what we did, but now we're letting you know we did this. Because according to him, whenever they had an inkling about Bryan, they never told the police department, if that's true. And we see how they are. They lie all the time. Idaho is literally trying to abolish the Fed. So this animosity, this argument makes sense considering the laws that we know are like trying to be passed by Idaho. But this is just unprofessional. If this case ends up getting thrown out for any reason other than him being completely innocent, because we still have to consider the fact that we don't know everything. Because what if the feds are like purposely messing up this case because they have issues with Moscow PD? I mean, it's kind of far-fetched, but is it really? Wild. If true, extremely interesting.
I don't think it was till the 29th of November that the Washington State Police, 10 miles away, got around to looking at it. And then when they finally find a car that they identified a Kohberger, well, what happens to that official report? That's one of the stories that I reveal in the book, and I think it will both astonish and infuriate readers.
Now, that's been a big question, right? That's in Brett Payne's little affidavit, where a WSU officer saw that there was a car that matched a Bolo in the system. And then 30 minutes later, another WSU officer has their eyes on the physical car in the Steptoe apartment parking lot where Bryan Kohberger lives. Now, the way that the PCA, whatever, puts it, it makes it sound as if these are not related. There's no way in shit, okay? I'll tell you right now, 99.9% positive, it went down like this. The first dude saw it in the system, called somebody that he already knew was out and about or had somebody go out physically to do this on purpose. And the two were literally in contact with each other about the situation. Now, people have been asking this, and I know that Daniel from Drunk Turkey himself has made a comment about how it was probably written on a piece of paper and just hid into a pile somewhere on a desk. Maybe. I don't see how a police tip coming in from an actual police department, especially in the local area, would just be like thrown into a pile of boo-boo and not paid attention to. I feel like law enforcement tips are probably taken a lot more serious. That's just me and my thinking. I don't know. But Howard is making it sound as if we're going to be sort of upset about how that information ended up where it finally ended up. And this also leads a lot into the whole like the feds were douche faces about handing over anything, because that would technically mean that those traffic stops were orchestrated by the feds, which a lot of us kind of already thought, even though they came out and originally said, yeah, we were surveilling him, lost him for a little while, and then they retracted that. But Howard reiterates that.
I think what's most interesting about Loma is the FBI had lost him. They were trailing him, and they lost him until he got to Loma. The fact that the FBI was trailing him is an involved story that I think people will be interested in.
So a lot of this stuff from the very beginning is coming back, but a lot of this stuff is also stuff that originally came out from Howard, and he's just basically like putting everything he wrote in those airmail articles into this book. It's almost as if he just copy and pasted, the same way that Brett Payne does the PCA. So I'll admit I am curious about where that tip actually went and why it took so long from that November 29th date for them, according to the hearings, the most recent hearings, to get Bryan's information locally on December 23rd, because that's a month. So if the feds were doing all kind of stuff on the side in the shadows without the local police department knowing for almost a month, how many thousands of dollars or maybe even hundreds of thousands of dollars of local resources were wasted because the feds weren't sharing information? That's something else we got to think about here. Okay, you guys remember we talked about the pool party, right?
Is this pool party that Bryan Kohberger goes to, that he's invited to by people who lived, by someone who lived in the building.
What I would really like to know is how Howard knows what Bryan looked like at said pool party.
Bryan Kohberger is sitting there talking to people, and he hits on two of the women there who are in black two-piece suits, and he gets their numbers. He never calls them, but the women have told me they were getting hang-up calls in the aftermath, and where that's connected, who knows? He's sitting at the edge of the pool, and he's looking good. He's gotten in shape. He's lost over 100 pounds. He has his hair slicked, and he wanted to be a player. He wanted to be one of the other kids there, but because of who he was and who he is, he could not get involved in that sort of world. And I think that was what was perhaps tearing him apart.
Are there photos that we don't know about? Is there proof of something that we don't know about? Now, we've heard this story again. Again, this is nothing new. This is something that was already in Howard's little articles, which, by the way, let me know down in the comments if y'all want to actually go over those articles. I've thought about doing live streams where we go over like one article at a time. I personally don't really care for Howard, but he's getting information from people that might know stuff. It's interesting to try to like put some pieces together, but also call him out on his boo-boo, because we know for a fact that Steve Goncalves has not wanted to talk to Howard. That any information that Howard has or did get about Steve came majorly from Brat Norton. And that's pretty much where we've like figured out that whole connection. Because Steve doesn't want to have anything to do with Howard. They've made that really, really clear. So not only is he discussing this case when Steve doesn't even like him, doesn't really want him doing any of this. Of course, he has the constitutional right to, but now he's taken all that exact same information that Steve has come out and been like, no, that's crap. No, I never said that. I haven't talked to you, blah, blah, blah. And he's putting all of it in a book that's about to be a movie. It's just stupid.
He wasn't so much stalking the house as trying to get up the nerve to cross this mental boundary where he could be a killer. Each time he tries to escape, to drive off, to get away from the demons that are urging him to go into the house. And when he finally comes back and realizes he can't escape from these demons, he's able to find the strength to turn off the key. It took the strength of Hercules, in effect, to turn off the key on his Hyundai and then take the knife in his hand, walk down that hill, his feet crunching on the ice, till he gets to the kitchen door, which then opens up like an intake of breath. It's the only sound in this very quiet night. And after that, that's when the night comes falling down with a madness all of its own. It's a grisly, grisly moment.
Oh, Howie. Can I call you Howie? I'm going to call you Howie. How the hell do you know that? The police department could not and still have not. I mean, I know the gag order, blah, blah, blah. But they could not tell us, even right after Bryan's arrest, prior to the gag order being implemented, which direction the suspect came in the house. Nor, Mr. There's no blood trail outside, which way the suspect left the house. Everybody and their mama in that neighborhood had the pin code to that front door. We saw proof of it on body cam. So what do you mean he parked somewhere and walked down a hill? So now you're telling me that you also are claiming to know the exact spot he parked his car? Were these said cracks of crunched ice under his feet as he walked back and forth found? Because they have no trail of how anyone left that house. This guy is literally writing like a script for a movie and making up facts. None of that stuff is probably true. We don't know. He's literally guessing and creating an entire scenario. It took the strength of Hercules to turn off the car. No, it didn't. It's a wrist flick. Okay. I understand what he's trying to do here, but him doing all of this very elaborative writer's bullshit, that doesn't do anything for the facts of the case. This is dramatic and traumatic enough. You don't need to do shit like, it took the strength of Hercules to turn off the car and fight those demons. Come on. This is just aggravatingly stupid.
The real bigger question is, why did Dylan do nothing?
Yeah.
Why did she, not call 911? What happened after those moments? And that's something I do discuss in the book.
This is where you're going to see that he's legitimately full of shit because he questions the 8 hours of the 911 call, but then says stuff about how he thinks that whatever happened led to this, or if this is what happened, this is why Dylan reacted this way. He goes back and forth from acting like he actually knows for sure to literally making it very clear that he don't know a damn thing.
That trauma might have saved her life. For example, when Xana says there's someone here, if she had not spoken, if Kohberger might have just passed her by. I discuss in the book whom I think was the primary target, and her speaking up, I think, cost Xana her life. I think perhaps Dylan remaining silent saved her life.
Now, but see, that doesn't make sense either. Because according to what we're being told, Dylan opened the door right as the person was walking in front of her, which would mean that she was mere inches away from this person. There's no way this person would not have noticed that door creaking open if it opened at all, because we don't really know if that's true. We don't. Also, right here, he's claiming that it was Xana that said that there was somebody there, but in the PCA, it's listed as if it was Kaylee. And like I've mentioned, I feel like if you're in a house where you have multiple floors, you're going to be able to tell if the noises that you're hearing are coming from above your freaking head or from through your walls. Okay? So the PCA claims that it was Kaylee. Brett Payne thinks it could have been Xana because of this TikTok stuff, but that doesn't really mean anything. Literally at all. At all. But this also goes into the whole, this person was so meticulous that they didn't get any blood anywhere else besides the 2 rooms. Nowhere else in the house. At least that's what we're being like made to understand. That whenever the roommates woke up, they didn't know why they couldn't get Xana's door open, so they called one of the fraternity brothers, Hunter Johnson, over to then get the door open, and that's whenever they discovered what happened with Ethan and Xana, and they didn't know anything about what happened upstairs until the first responders got there and said, "Does anybody else live here?" And then they were like, "Oh no, Maddie and Kaylee." That's how we were told from the beginning, and that story kind of has like concreted over time. Like we've gotten more details, but that whole thing about there being like nothing to show that there was an issue has pretty much like remained the same, which a lot of us who know science don't really quite understand because of the 8 hours, the amount of bodies that were decomposing, what happens to a body after the heart stops beating. There's just no way that they just didn't have any inkling whatsoever. Like, even if you are a freaking novice and have no freaking clue, you know when something's wrong. You might not know what, but you know if something smells funny, something feels funny, and something ain't sitting right. Right? And then again, for them to try to tell us that Murphy wasn't barking his head off at the scent of all of that blood and body fluid, ain't no way. So not only is he saying it's a different person that made the statement about somebody being there, but now he's using the fact that that was said as a reason why somebody's life was lost. And if it really was Kaylee, then it ain't got nothing to do with Ethan and Xana literally at all. So how do you explain that one, Howard? And how do you also explain that if the target wasn't the only one that was taken out, and there was additional people that ended up being taken out too, then how do you still explain the meticulousness? The no DNA anywhere but a knife sheath where it could be easily transferred anywhere. And I know Howie over here knows exactly about touch DNA. He can try to pretend like he don't and act like it matters, but this real reporter damn well knows about transfer, especially when it comes to something so minuscule. So this whole thing he's talking about doesn't make sense. To me, it doesn't make sense.
But I've heard of the 911 call. is just a whale. It's just, heartbreaking, but I don't think it's of any evidentiary value.
No, I know the very beginning of that makes it sound as if he's heard the 911 call, but if you go and listen to the full thing, you'll know that that's not true. What he has heard about the 911 call is what he just stated, that it's just like a big, huge wailing cry, which understandable if the case, but that's still a bit strange because they were gonna leak it. Not leak it. The cops were going to give it to us. The cops were going to release the 911 call literally the day before Bryan Kohberger's arrest was announced. They said they were going to give the 911 call to the public. And that was never anything that made logical sense to me because they were over in Pennsylvania about to put cuffs on him and watching him while Fry's over here telling people literally on camera for the entire world to hear that they were thinking about releasing the 911 call. What good would it have done if it really just is a bunch of wailing, crying, screaming that no one can understand? And if that is the case, then the whole unconscious person thing makes a lot more sense because we talked about that too in the very beginning of this, that in the first like 10 to 12, maybe 15-ish seconds, if the dispatch people can't really figure out what's happening based on what they're hearing, it's a generic code to send out to get the cops where they need to be going. It's an unconscious person code. So yeah, I don't know why that they said they were going to give out the information for the 911 call if it literally is just a bunch of crying and you can't make out any words on it. I don't know.
The larger mystery is the 8 hours between Dylan's citing the intruder, I think twice, and then making this call. And then when she makes the call, she doesn't call 911. She calls friends from the fraternity. They come down, and one of Ethan's buddies eventually makes the 911 call on her phone, on Dylan's phone.
Now, that could be how it went down, but it doesn't sound exactly like the original story that we sort of heard through Christy telling it to Daniel from Drunk Turkey. The way that I remember it was that Hunter J showed up, was able to get the door open enough to see what was happening, like what happened inside, and yelled, "Get the F out, call 911, get the F out." Like he was yelling at the girls, "Get the F out the house, call 911." So if Dylan, her phone was used, there's a big possibility, this is big possibility, whoever was making the 911 call was yelling and screaming and crying, and maybe Hunter Johnson took the phone from them and like finished the call. That's possible. But the whole like crying thing, I really can't get like behind. I just can't because we've been told for a very long time now. They were very aware of what was happening. There was text messages going on between the two roommates. It's even in the PCA. Forensic downloads of Dylan and Bethany's phones. So I can't let go of any of all that yet. People can fake cry. We've heard 911 calls of parents that did horrible things to their children that faked it on the phone or done horrible things, period, that fake it. We've seen women literally go and, trigger warning, cut babies out of a pregnant woman's stomach, go to the hospital with this baby, pretend like it was them that gave birth, and sit there and like talk about the whole story and how it happened and all the way that the things were during the entire pregnancy just for the cops to show up an hour later after finding a body. You cannot trust somebody whining and crying. Okay. So until we get some more facts, maybe there was some whining and crying and screaming and oh my gosh on the phone for the 911 call. Very well could have been. But how much of it was real? That's my problem here. How much of it was real? This next part about the change of venue actually has my attention. Listen.
You're going to have to exclude anyone from the university, most probably. Pastor Wilson has told me that his group has had many conflicts with the police coming out of the pandemic. His son and grandson have gone on trial. He has said to me on the record that the police lied when they were talking about his parishioners and his son and grandson during the trial. And so, since they've lied before, I would counsel my parishioners not to believe any policemen on the stand. I think they will be very sympathetic to anyone who's opposing the police narrative in Moscow. I think they will get a more favorable jury pool than if they move elsewhere in the state.
See? Now, a lot of people covering the case here on YouTube talk about the church, but it's more of like trying to figure out if this is related to something in the church. I don't know. I just know that it's a topic. I don't know like the very specifics. But that being said, this is interesting because I think he's right. most of everybody from the University of Idaho would have to be pretty much excluded because of the circumstance. That makes a lot of sense, a lot of sense. So that would leave the church. And since this wasn't church related, the church isn't the one responsible for taking the biggest piece of evidence in the case and just completely demolishing it into the ether. That makes the entire population, or the majority of what's left of the population that could be on the jury, part of that church. So I'd really like you guys' thoughts on that, because that's a really interesting concept. Ann Taylor would kind of know all of this, right? Like, I know that she's not technically from Latah. She's coming to Latah County for Bryan from Kootenai County. But I feel like she would know this dynamic because she would know of the Stickergate situation and like probably several others that we just don't know about. Unless somehow she just doesn't. Maybe she does now, but I really want to know what you guys think, because that's an interesting concept.
He talks about that with his father on this trip across America, how
Really?
what is happening at WSU to him and how he feels he maybe can right the situation. Because at this point, even though he's been formally fired from asked not to come back, or not to, he's not going to get his scholarship and not going to be a teaching assistant. He hasn't received that notification as of yet. He just knows that something is in the works, and he still thinks there is a way out of this, and he believes, or he wants to believe, that he can talk his way out of this, and that when he returns, there will be a hearing where he will be triumphant and he will get reinstated as a teaching assistant.
Now, again, I don't know everything. I just know what I know, and what I know comes from documents. All right? I'm going to just say right now that what Howie just said here is false. This is why. In all the documentation I have extra for this case, where I have all the Don Daniels stuff, I also have this stuff. He wouldn't need to be being trespassed off of a property that he'd previously been fired from. That's not how that works. He would not have had to have given them permission and be giving back the keys all this time later if there was already a formal firing, a formal don't come back, okay? Also, when you get fired from places where you have to have like security keys and you have logins that are very business or school specific, email addresses for those logins that are very school specific, he would not have been able to have been logged in grading papers the day after Christmas if he had formally been fired. Now, WSU Kim has said a lot of things, but one thing that she did say that I don't have any qualms with is the fact that she herself called up there to ask about Bryan right after the arrest, but prior to the gag order, and found that he was actually still on the roster for the next semester. So I don't know where he's getting his information from, but what WSU Kim said, and the paperwork that I have that is literally official paperwork for the Washington side of this case, that is now also on the Idaho side, because duh, that doesn't make sense. That doesn't make sense at all. Why wouldn't he have taken all of his electronics with him? And for him to say, oh, he thought he could right the wrong, okay, you would not have access. He would not have had access to be logged in, to be grading papers if he had been formally fired. No, that's not how that works at all. And again, if you are fired from being a TA, you're also not getting your scholarship, which means that you can't afford to go back the next semester and you're dunzos. Before the arrest, they don't need to give you a trespassing notice to tell you not to ever come back ever again after you've already been fired. I don't know where he's getting his info from, but the paperwork, the official documentation that we have access to, tells a different story. Where you at, Bri?
What makes the drug angle so fascinating is that it's going to be part of the defense's argument. I think they're going to show how drug could possibly, if you have to create an alternative scenario, you have to tell a different story. They're going to focus on that. The head of the drug task force in the area, Sheriff Brett Myers, said that's the answer that makes sense to him the most, drugs. Also, you have so many of the victims, their families have ties to drug problems. As you know, Ann Taylor, Kohberger's lawyer, knows full well, Xana Kernodle's mother was in jail at the time, and she was going to defend her, Kara Kernodle, from the drug charges. So there is this, all the questions inexorably lead back to drugs. Tying into that is university life, fraternity row. Well, I interview people in the book who talk about drug dealing on University Row, something that's being confirmed in the book by police authorities.
This theory gets talked about a lot on my channel. A lot of you guys know who Bryan is. He's an older gentleman who used to work like in psychology, and he's been just kind of goes on like all the channels talking about stuff. And from his dynamic, his point of view, he really believes in this theory. And I don't necessarily have I just don't. I think it may be possible. All things are possible at this point, okay? All things are possible. I just don't see it as being that way. I could be wrong, but there's a lot of dynamics here that we're also not being told the truth about. So I would need more to really hunker down on Bryan's theory, but I don't care if it gets discussed. So I know all of the details because whenever I go live or go back and I read my comments, I allow these conversations. I'm not one of those creators who doesn't allow people to talk about other things or not mention other channels on my channel. I mentioned this in like all of the lives lately that I've been doing since I started doing lives about how people like mention other channels and then apologize at the end of their statement. And I'm like, why do they do that? Like, it's wild to me. I don't care if other channels get mentioned. There's a few people that are not allowed to be mentioned on my channel, but people that know me know why and know that it's very valid reasons. But for just random discussions or just random theories, have at it. And I don't care if people like bicker a little bit. We're all adults. Don't be a-holes and I won't say anything. Like, you can have differences of opinions. You can even argue about it a little bit. Just don't be disrespectful. It's not that difficult. So, that being said, I know a lot about the whole rug theory, vitamin theory, as we have to talk about it here on YouTube, because I allow these conversations and I go back and I read them. So, Bryan, most of you guys know, has been on this for a long time, and it has a lot to do with some of the victims' moms' drug charges and the way that those drug charges played out and like a couple other things. And it's pretty detailed. When the people that are really into this theory, they've really put a lot of work into it. So I understand why a lot of people think this is it. But it's really hard to imagine that with all of the partying and stuff that was going on, that their toxicology reports would be so clean, if in fact this is true.
Of the four victims, according to what I've been able to learn from the autopsies, there was no trace of drugs in any of the systems of the four victims. None. They had no drug use themselves.
Now, what I don't know is a lot about those kinds of things. I'm not someone who's going to act like I know everything, okay? Because I don't. I don't. What I do know is that for some reason, a plant made by nature will stick to your fat cells for 30 to 45 days, but something that could kill you the first time you try it can be gone within like 24 to 48, maybe 72 hours, depending on what it is. Wild as shit, but that's about as far as I know about those kinds of things. So, when it comes to the delay in the 911 call, is there anything, and I know I'm going to do my own research on this because this is just like something coming to my mind right now, and I know that people are going to end up leaving comments, and I'll go and research what I'm being told too. Is there anything that could be used to subdue that would fade away in that amount of time? Because we don't really honestly know like how long hearts were still beating after the attack. We don't. We're not going to sit here and pretend we do either, because we all know that Mabbit lady is off her rocker. So we're just not going to sit here and pretend. Okay. Is there anything that could have been used to subdue them to make this a quiet situation that could have disappeared out of their system that quickly? I don't believe so. But I also don't know if certain things even show up that way. That's something I probably should look into, honestly. Because I've always just been curious about how certain things could happen and if certain things can just like dissipate that quickly. Like, I know that the body can't metabolize things after it's no longer alive. I don't know. I have a lot of questions, I guess.
The only DNA that we're aware of, or that I'm aware of, is the DNA in the sheath. So whoever committed this crime closely with a knife and didn't leave anything, sweat, eyelash, and eyebrow hair, nothing.
Exactly. Exactly. And the way that Howard's theory is that Xana was the one who said someone was here, and that got the person's attention, and hence that's why Ethan and Xana were then targeted. So then in his theory, This person was able to do all of these things in under 8 minutes in the dark, with 2 of the attacks being completely unplanned and unprepared for, and still ninja'd out of there with nothing but one latent shoe print that might not even belong to the suspect. No, no, that doesn't make sense. That's why none of this makes sense. None of it. It was either a full-on attack on all 4 that was handled in a way that we're probably never going to know now because an 8-hour delay in a 911 call and a house being torn down. I mean, I don't really know what else it could have been besides that, because there's no way that this was like some last minute situation with all of these really strange things that happened and this is how it turned out. If he had been surveilling them, watching them, Kaylee's car was never there before. That Range Rover was there for the very first time ever. There were other people driving around the neighborhood. That's a fact. You can hear the traffic. Brett Payne is full of crap when he says there's not a lot of movement. No, bull crap. It never stops. It never stops. In Banfield and all the Linda Lane stuff, you can hear crap all night. It never stops. The dog being there and not barking its head off like crazy while these attacks were happening. None of it makes any sense. And the person that they're trying to say did it ended up with no visible injuries whatsoever. Nobody aimed for the face. Nobody hit him or did anything hard enough to make him limp or give him any sort of injuries at all. No redness, no bruises, no, ow, sorry, my arm is sore. I can't lift that up today. No, nothing. Just makes no sense. Now, this next clip doesn't have anything to do with the case, but I only put it in here to show you guys that this guy, he's a writer. He's full of fantasy. And the way that he kind of just like, I don't know, smiles too much talking about this stuff, it just rubs me wrong. Sorry. Wrong vibe, creepy vibe. I don't like it. It's almost like it's a fantasy world that he really likes to divulge himself into, because he over exaggerates things that are already traumatic, dramatic. They don't need any elaboration. So I want you to listen to this just so you can kind of get an understanding of how much of a wackadoodle I think this guy actually is.
In the early days, before the house was torn down, I went out there on a snowy night and I stood in front of it in the darkness, and it's incredibly quiet. They have a plywood frame erected over the door, and I'm thinking to myself, was that put up to keep people out or to keep the demons that are at large in that house inside so they don't spread out? And suddenly a light shines on me and I'm trapped in it, startling me. One Xana's comment, there's someone here, suddenly be surprised. And the light that trapped me, suddenly a voice called out and said, be careful out there. It's icy and slippery. I don't want you to fall. And there was a security car parked catty corner. It was black. I hadn't seen it, and he was able suddenly to flash the light on me. I thanked him. He was being very polite, and I walked off. But you can see what it must have been in the middle of the night in that house to wake up and to see someone standing over you in black with a mask on and a hunting knife in his hand.
No, Howie. No. A security guard holding a flashlight up to you and saying, hey, don't slip on the ice, old fragile man, is not the same as somebody waking up in the middle of the night with somebody hovering over them with a knife in their hand. You are out of your ever-loving mind. I do find it interesting that he said hunting knife, though. Well, I guess that's it. It was interesting, but it just proved to me more that Blum, whatever, he's just full of it. This is like a fantasy thing to him. That's the kind of weird vibe that I get. The way that he just acts whenever he talks about it, it's kind of like uncomfortable, honestly. But again, I want to know what you guys think about all of this insanity, especially though about his comment about the change of venue situation, because that did get my attention. It did. And I want to know what you guys think about it too. Not only that, but let me know if you guys want to go over those articles of his so that we can go through and debunk his boo-boo based off of facts that we know are true. And yeah, We'll probably do those live though, so that it can be a discussion. Let me know if you guys want to do that. But that's it. If you guys like the way that I present this information and give my opinion, please do not forget to leave a like on the way out and subscribe to the channel if you are not subscribed already. See y'all.